It's a big pleasure to be able to hear from Talmidei Chachamim across the country on inyanim that many of us have been discussing and working on as part of this year. The Kollel took on a special initiative to promote awareness in business halacha areas, and that was with the help of and the participation of partnership of a law firm, a local law firm, Stakan and Braverman, and they took initiative with us to really promote these inyanim, business halacha awareness, call it morals and halacha, where oftentimes for whatever reason it's been understood that people can keep the halacha and do what they have to do at in shul. We keep the halacha, we do what we have to do, but in business is business, and tzedakah is tzedakah, and learning is learning. But when you start getting into Choshen Mishpat inyanim, and you start realizing how vast and how much Torah there is, and halacha there is, and direction there's given in all sorts of areas. So this initiative has been very powerful, very strong, and in allowing people to understand the importance of Choshen Mishpat, the breadth of Choshen Mishpat, how much it deals with sending people, and in every area of business and daily life as well. And we've also incorporated in that is tried to have people understand the importance of dealing with and litigating in Beis Din as well. So there's been a big Chiddush Hashem, Baruch Hashem, and in summer months when we've noticed that people are all over the place, people want to connect still, we decided to do things a little differently, thanks to the help of Yerachmiel Parsons, really taking the initiative on this series. So thank you, Yerachmiel, and thank you to all our participants. So at this time, it's a covet for Rabbi Weg to give the shiur, and in Mitzvah Shem, we still hope to get Rabbi Weg to come down to Florida, but if offering in August is not a very tempting offer, but the Mitzvah Shem January, February, we'll have a chance of getting Rabbi Weg to join. So, Yishar Koach.
Okay, Shkayach, it's a pleasure to join you online. And the way Rabbi Rachmiel explained to me is that the title of the shiur is Bein Adam L'Chaverei and Choshen Mishpat going together, which really introduces a tremendous hashkafa chelik in the way Jew does business and the entire approach to Choshen Mishpat in general. We find in the Ramban al Torah by the Parsha of Kedoshim Tiyu, which the Ramban learns Kedoshim Tiyu, unlike Rashi. The Ramban says, don't be a novel Rishus HaTorah. Don't over-engage oneself in Gashmias pursuits. And the Ramban explains that when the Torah was given, the Torah gives us Kollel and Pratim. Similar to on Shabbos, we have a Leisasa called Malacha, which is 39 specific Malachas. And then the Torah tells us Shabbos. It should be a day of rest, which Chazal saw in that the entire flavor of Shabbos, that Shabbos should be a day of rest, and it captures the mood of the halacha. That's what Shabbos means. So Kedoshim Tiyu, we find many Yisurim, many Lavim in the Torah, which tells a person what to eat, etc., etc. But then the Torah says, Kedoshim Tiyu, what's the rule? What's the klal? What do we do with the gray area? The gray area, we're told, Kedoshim Tiyu. So the Ramban says over here, in the beginning of Parashat Kedoshim, the Torah, this is the derech of Torah. The Torah tells us a klal, and the Torah tells us pratim examples. After the Torah tells us all the pratim of the dinim, the Torah tells us don't steal, don't rob, don't cheat. The Torah tells us that when we interact with somebody else, We have to do hayosher v'atayv, what is straight and what is good. Sheyachnis, sheyachnis ba'aseh, that the Torah gives a mitzvah aseh, hayosher, acting straight, the hashvoya, and with fairness, l'fnim yishuras hadin, l'rotzin shel chaverei. The Ramban explains that the mitzvah of asisa v'yosher v'atayv is encapsulating all the halachas of ben adam l'chaverei in money, and it's telling us how we are supposed to interact with another person. The Torah, on the one hand, is very capitalist. The Torah, on the one hand, believes a person should make hishtadlus, do whatever he has to do, whatever he is allowed to do to make money. However, the Torah tells us, the cloud of all the loisases in the Torah, which refer to other people's money, is included. The cloud is v'asisa hayosher v'atayv, and the Ramban on Parshas Eschanan, he discusses even more. He says like this: L'fishi efshar lahazger b'Torah, l'fishi it's impossible. Lahazger b'Torah kol hanhagos ha'adam b'mishchenav. The Torah cannot possibly list the way a person should deal with his friends, the Re'av, the Chol Masoyu Matanai. The Torah cannot tell us every single case of business. The Tikkune Hayisha V'Abdidus Kulam. The Torah requires us to go ahead and make Takanas Hayishav, to make rules. There's a fascinating truth, Sam Sefer, where he talks about certain safety laws. The truth Beit Shlomo, I believe, where he talks about someone who's making ammunition, and there was a din, there was a government ordinance that they had to have steel doors, and the Beit Shlomo says, some say it's a similar thing, that if the law is reasonable, it promotes public safety, it promotes people living with each other, b'shalom u'shalva, so Bezdin themselves would have been required to make such a law, and therefore such a law is negaya to us. Bezdin will enforce it because part of a sisa yosher v'atayv, yishuv haMedina kulam. That's what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants. The achrei shehizkid harbe, and after the Torah tells us many interactions, lo yseilech rochel, lo yisokom, lo yisoter. The Torah says v'asiso hayosher v'atayv. The Torah tells us a person should act with straightness and with goodness until the pshara, l'fnim yishuras hadin, all of that goes into the way one is required to conduct business. And the Ramban learns that it's a mitzvah, same in our Torah, to go ahead and to be a mensch. And over here, part of the Lakewood BMG Smicha V'her program, the Cheshmish V'her, they have a chapter, they have a unit called the Yosher V'Tayv unit. Because although Yosher V'Tayv is a very general term of how a Yid does business, and we'll learn together a Chazanish in a few minutes, but basically we find several halachas in Shulchan Aruch where these halachas are labeled as Yosher V'Tayv. That we find certain halachas in Shulchan Aruch, which the source, so to say, of these halachas is Yosher V'Tayv. One is, the most famous one, is the halacha of Bar Metzra. The halacha of Bar Metzra, which says that if a property goes up to sale next to somebody else's field, and therefore there would be kedai for the neighbor to go ahead and buy this field also, it would make his life easier. It would save him a lot of money. So then we prohibit other people for buying the field for the same price. They can go ahead. They can spend more money. That's a teivas hamaycher. But to buy it for the same price, we give it to the next neighbor because that's yosher v'tayv. Let the other people buy elsewhere. This property is something unique to this particular individual, and therefore Bosiso Ayosher V'Atayv tells us to leave it for the Bar Metzra, to leave it for the neighbor. We have the halachas of Yorid Lumnosi Shal Chaverei, halachically justified competition and halachically justified non-competition, going ahead and taking away, infringing on another person's livelihood. That also goes into Yasher V'Tayv. And what we're going to discuss tonight primarily is Ani Hamahap B'Charara. If somebody is trying to get a particular deal, may somebody else try to grab the deal away from him. But before we understand and we learn Yasher V'Tayv, my deal, your deal, there's a very, very important Chaznish. Actually, the Chaznish has two parts. It's printed in the Chaznish on Emunah and B'Tachin in Perek Gimel. Chaznish on Emunah and B'Tachin on Perek Gimel. And the Chaznish over there is discussing the halachas of competition. In other words, basically, in a nutshell, the halacha is that somebody from out of town is not allowed to compete with somebody in town. However, somebody else in town is allowed to compete, provided he doesn't put the first business out of business totally. And Ramesha writes in the Tshuva that even if he's going to make the business non-viable, that he's going to lower the amount of money being brought in, that the original proprietor will have to take on a second job, and obviously can't be two places at the same time. So that would be enough to be, so therefore he's going to have to close the store. But those are the basic halachas. Basically, a bar masa has the ability to go ahead and open up another store. An Eina bar masa, so does live in the city, may not open up another store. And even the bar masa who opens up another store, it's only if you're not putting the other guy out of business. If you're not putting the other guy out of business, and putting the guy out of business, Ramesha writes that the store will not be kedai to run as is. But that's a discussion by itself. That's going to be very subjective to figure out exactly what's called that you're putting them out of business or not, makes the store not kedai. But those are the basic halachas. It's actually very interesting. Shaila came into us on this sugya that there was an online Judaica store which would send out these Jewish e-blasts to all over the country, and it was ruining the business of a local store. It was ruining the business of the local store, and the local store asked one of the small communities, and they asked the fellow at this online business to remove people with his zip code from the online business. And the question which the Beis Din discussed at great length is, on the one hand, when you look at it, surface level, it sounds like it's very simple. He's an Eina bar masa, he doesn't live in the city, and therefore he's not allowed to open up a business in that city. However, the Beis Din at the end concluded not like that, and the Beis Din looked at it differently. The Beis Din said that there's two communities. There's the hard community and the soft community. There's the local community where you go into the store, you pick up the book, and then you have the online community. On the online community, this new form of commerce, this Amazon-like commerce, everybody's a bar masa and everybody's not a bar masa. And therefore, the local store would not be able to stop the other fellow from competing with a taina that he doesn't live in the city. But I'll call upon him to get this condition. I want to share with the Ilam. What comes out basically is, if you live in the city, you can compete as long as you don't put the guy out of business. You don't live in the city, you're not allowed to compete, with the exception of a mikri dardaki. Rabbeim who want to come and teach children. So there the Gemara says that kina say from tar b'chachma. So the Chaznish is like this: Uman shel b'nei masa motzi ma'akiv. Imagine you own a store in town. Another person wants to come ahead and open up a store. The halacha is, first of all, a person out of town wants to open up a store. The halacha is, you take the guy to Beis Din, matzi ma'akiv. You have a taina, you go to the local Beis Din. It might take up time from your learning. It might take up time from your working in the store, but you have the halachic right, and therefore you have the responsibility to your family to take this fellow to Beis Din. He doesn't live in the town. He's opening up a store, and he is being ma'akim in your business. Zot the Chazon Ish, these are powerful words. Einoi al tzad hametzias, ela al tzad chiyav hashtadus. When the person goes to Bezdin, and he takes the other person to Bezdin, and he screams in front of Bezdin, that fellow is ruining my parnasa. The Chazon Ish says, Einoi al tzad hametzias. It's not factual. He's not ruining my parnasa factually. Why? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom decides on Rosh Hashanah exactly how much money every person is going to have. And therefore, if a person is going to do proper hishtadlus, he will end up with the exact correct amount of money that he is supposed to have. And therefore, maybe the Rebbeinu Shalom passed from Rosh Hashanah, they should have less money. And the way the Rebbeinu Shalom did it was by sending this person. But the Chazon Ish explains that it's al tzad ha'hishtadlus. We're mechuyetim hishtadlus with parnasa. So when halacha is on our side, so then the tax of hishtadlus, the chiyuv of hishtadlus, I always say over, a person's mechuyev to buy diapers on sale, you're not allowed to waste your money. There's a chiyuv hishtadlus. A person's not allowed to waste his money. So if a person has a legal claim in Bezdin, so then he's mechuyev to go ahead and to make hishtadlus, and therefore sometimes the hishtadlus requires taking the fellow to Bezdin. However, if the halacha is against him, so then it's not the pshat that it's the other fellow which is being mafsid him, but rather the pshat is that the Rebbeinu was geyser to have less money on Erev Rosh Hashanah. And even when a person takes somebody else to Bezdin, somebody even when somebody has the halachic right or the halachic responsibility to take a person to Bezdin, the Chazon Ish says that that's part of your chiyuv hishtadlus. A person should not get overly emotionally involved. Hamachiv lechem chuka shel kol yitzur, the one who takes care of all creatures. Betach yitin leidei machsayre, the Rebbeinu Shalom will give him what he's required to have. V'aredifach hasibos hameduyos, and the person who runs after what seems to be cause and effect is tir halev, znus reinayim, and it's hevel. Whenever we're mishtadel, we try to go after a deal. Whether we're trying to go after a deal, somebody cuts us out, someone else is trying to get the same deal. The Chazon Ish says one has to recognize all we're doing is hishtadlus. And when the Torah tells us because of Yosher Torah to let it go, so that it wasn't bashert for us in the first place. And when the Torah allows us to go, so then one has a chiyuv hishtadlus. It's almost like the Chazon Ish is telling us that if the guy who opens up a competing store has the halachic right to do so, so Baruch Hashem, you can sit and learn, you can sit and play with your kids, because there's no further hishtadlus necessary. If Nebuch, he's a bar masa, he's an Ein bar masa, and therefore you have a halachic taina against him. So Nebuch, now you have to waste your time to go ahead and to do hishtadlus. The Chazon Ish also writes over here at the beginning of Perek Gimel that one has to be in contact with those who know Choshen Mishpat. He says Piskei halacha and the chiyuv musar go hand in hand. He tells a story that there was a city which had Malami Chinekis. It had Rabbeim who were Malami Chinekis. For many years, these Chavru were Malami Chinekis. Somebody moved in from out of town, and this fellow moved in from out of town. He opened up shop competing. And since he opened up competing, they went to the Malami Chinekis, new guys, and they told them that you're roifim, you're stealing. Well, let's skip the step. He says, you know what happens? Usually when anything is new, everybody jumps on the bandwagon. So sure enough, these Malami Chinekis, the old ones who had kids, so now all of a sudden they find themselves parnasa free. They find that all the kids are going across the hall. They're going down. They're going to go check out the new institution, and therefore they start hating the other fellow, they start being afraid of them, they start speaking Lashon Hara about them, the Lashon Hara is either true or not true, they start a whole camp to go ahead to Ma'ir, the Rachmei Bnei Ha'ir, Neged the Achzoriyah Shal Avoim HaChadoshim. They make a whole focus about the people who are going and being so cruel to them, and they take the whole city and they make a whole machlokes and a whole bahala. So the Chaznish writes, Hine kol ma'aseim hayemenukim mikol chetz. What they did would have been fine, lu haisa halacha k'maisa, had they been right in halacha. It sounds terrible. These new guys come to town, they all undercut the old fellows, the old chevra, and since they undercut the old chevra, they're losing their parnasa, and these guys are speaking Lashon Hara, they're getting the rallying up the crowds against them, they're driving them out of town. Zok the Chaznish, 1 second. Let's open up our Shulchan Aruch. Who's the Reidif, who's the Nirdif? Who's the Rosh, who's the Tzaddik? Who's halachically right? Who's halachically wrong? If it would have been a candy store, they'd be 100% right. And the other chevra would be the new people who came to town would have been wrong. But we're not talking about a candy store. We're talking about Milamdei Tinekes. By Milamdei Tinekes, the halacha is that new people from out of town are allowed to come to town. You have to know how it applies today with schools, a little more complicated. But anyway, the point the Chaznish is making is that before we decide who's a Reidif and who's a Nirdif, before we decide whether she's a Rasha for stealing my cleaning lady or not a Rasha for stealing my cleaning lady, whether he's a Rasha for grabbing my deal or not a Rasha for grabbing my deal, one has to know who on whose side is halacha. And whenever we go ahead and we do hishtadlus, we have to recognize Parnasa comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. Parnasa comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. We have a chiyuv hishtadlus. The Chayil Savavis writes that the reason why the Torah gave a chiyuv hishtadlus is to test us. To test us, are we going ahead and taking matters into our own hands, or are we being mishtadel because the Rebbeinu Shalom tells us that we have to be mishtadel? And how one deals with competition, and whether a person lives with Yosher V'Tayv, the Ben Adam L'Chaveroi of business, that's what defines whether a person is doing the Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is the Sisa V'Yosher V'Tayv, this mitzvah of Chayshim Mishpat, to deal like a mensch, but one has to constantly recognize that Parnasa comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. Hishtadlus is a tax which is put on all of mankind. However, we're mishtadel properly, and the rest, the Parnasa itself, comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Gemara tells in Kedusha, it's Paskin and Shulchan Aruch and Simon Reish Lav and Zayin, that if you have an ani hamahapech hamacharora, if you have a poor fellow, an ani, hamahapech. Hamahapech means he's exerting effort. He's exerting effort to get himself a charora. So an ani hamahapech charora, ubo achar v'noploi, and somebody else goes ahead and takes it away from him, nikra Rasha. An ani hamahapech charora, somebody who is trying to get something, ubo acher, and somebody else comes, the notloi, and he grabs it away from him. So the halacha is nikra Rasha. Actually, a very interesting diak this Chayshim brings down. It says ubo acher v'notloi. A stranger comes and he takes it. Let's say the son of the one who's giving out the charara, the brother of the one who's giving out the charara, wants the deal, and he takes it away from the potential lekeach, so then he's not called a Rasha. Because of their relationship, their blood relationship, he has a certain kedima. But an oni hamahav v'charara ubo achar v'noitloi is nikra Rasha. This is machlokes in Shulchan Aruch, or machlokes Rishonim. What are we talking about? Meaning like this: the ani was trying to get the charara. Was the ani trying to buy the charara, or was the Harara Hefker being given away for free, and the Ani was trying to get a free Harara? The question really is, in other words, was there another Harara available for the second fellow who got involved? The first day at Shulchan Aruch holds that Ani HaMahapach B'Charara, the Ani HaMahapach B'Charara is talking about a situation where there's another Harara available. There's another Harara available. I'm trying to buy a Harara. I'm sure Ani was trying to buy a Harara. Now, the Ani is trying to buy this Harara, and somebody sees the Ani running and he asks him where he's going to buy a Harara. Hey, I also want a Harara. So he runs and he grabs and he buys the Harara before the Ani gets the Harara. So that, according to the first day, he's called a Rasha. The Ani exerted efforts, and it's like a benefit loss type of mishkal. The Ani already put efforts into this Harara. Therefore, let the second guy find himself a different Harara. Hararas are available. Go find yourself a different Harara. However, if this is the only Harara, for example, it's Hefker, it's a deal, the deal of the century, and therefore there's only one Harara. So therefore, according to the first day in Shulchan Aruch, there is no halacha of Ani HaMahapach B'Charara. Because the whole Ani HaMahapach B'Charara, according to this day, is that why go ahead and make me exert effort in vain? Go exert effort elsewhere and get your own Harara. So therefore, if something is one of a kind, something is not readily available locally, so according to the first day in Shulchan Aruch, there is no rule of Ani HaMahapach B'Charara, and therefore the second fellow would not be considered to be a Rasha if he grabs it away. The second day in Shulchan Aruch argues. The second day in Shulchan Aruch says no. That even if something's an opportunity, the fact that the first fellow was mahapech, the fact that the first person exerted effort to try to get that item, so that gives them a kinyan, a semi-kinyan in the item, and if somebody grabs it away from him, then that fellow would be considered to be a Rasha. So the first day holds that it's only true when there's something else available, and then we say, look, Ruvain was mahapach over here, let Shimon be mahapach elsewhere. The second day holds no, hipuch is a kinyan, and therefore, no matter what, the second guy cannot involve himself after the first guy is already involved. Lahalacha, the Ramah paskins that if there's no other such deal available, so then if this product is not available elsewhere, so then there is no Ani HaMahapach B'Charara. Rabbi Feinstein writes in Tshuva, Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Zafar Rambam, that somebody who is a Baal Nefesh, a Talmud Chacham, should not involve himself in such a business deal, but rather he should go ahead and let it go. Now, there's an obvious stira to this halacha. Let's go to Shuras Hadin. The Ani HaMahapach B'Charara only applies where there is another one available. And by Hefker, there is no klal of Ani HaMahapach B'Charara. There's another Gemara. The Gemara tells us that an Ani HaMenakef Rosh Hazayis. You have a Zayis, and an Ani wants to go ahead and he wants to knock off the leket shikha and payah from the Zayis. He climbs up the tree and he starts banging off the Zaysim. The Zaysim are now gathering onto the tree. He's up on the tree knocking them down, and somebody else goes ahead and grabs him. So that person is over Gezel Midrabanan. Midrabanan, he really make a kinyan on it. Midrabanan not yet his, but that's Gezel Midrabanan for sure. The guy who takes that is a Rasha. The question is, why is the fellow a Rasha if he takes from the Ani, takes the olives which are on the floor? If ultimately if you tell me that there's no Ani HaMahapach B'Charara by a case of Hefker. So there are 14 roots given in the Achronim to this question, and they have tremendous nafkaminas la'alacha. The Marik says that the difference between a small tircha and a large tircha. If there's a small tircha involved, so then the fellow is not called a rasha. But a person has a large tircha, like climbing up on the tree, knocking down the olives, so that's considered to be a large tircha, and therefore that tircha is a kinyan midrabanan, and nobody else can grab it. The Marshal says that the reason why the onion nikin rich zayis is kind of those zasim is he puts his life at risk, because being on top of the tree, he's putting his life at risk. The Marit says that the second fellow is only getting it due to the efforts of the first fellow. Unlike a Dovish Hefker, where I run and you run, over here, the only reason why the second guy is getting these olives is because the first guy knocked them off the tree. The Mas Binyamin, which Mishabur brings the halacha, the Sam Sefer says that it depends on whether Daita you say meches or not. Does he really think he's going to get it without any competition? La halacha, we go more with number 3 and number 4. So basically speaking, if something is a rare opportunity, not available elsewhere, and Ruvain goes ahead and he starts being mishtadel to go ahead and to get it, and Shimon wants to go ahead and grab it away from him, so it depends. If Shimon is using Ruvain's efforts, it would for sure be usher. If it's only after Ruvain, sweet talk the meicher into selling it in the first place, for Shimon to use Ruvain's efforts, they for sure would be a Russian. If it was so clear that he was going to get it, he didn't even, the Rishon, Ruvain didn't even feel that it was up for grabs by anybody else. So then, again, Shimon would be a Russian. If neither of those things apply, so then, in a case of Mitzia, in a case where this is the only opportunity, so then the Ikar Adin, another person would be allowed to get himself involved. However, we said that a Midas Chasidus would not to get involved. Now, the Bais can point out that the only time when one is not allowed to get involved is when the deal is more or less consummated. We're dealing with a situation where, basically speaking, Reuven and Shimon are selling to each other. Sometimes there might be a little bit of haggling. People like haggling just for the fun of haggling, but every deal has a certain point where basically the meicher is satisfied, the lekeach is satisfied. They might be $5,000 away from each other, but really Reuven knows he's selling to Shimon, and Shimon knows he's selling to Reuven. It's a little bit of a war of nerves on those last few $1,000s. That is already enough to say that the deal was consummated, and therefore Ani HaMahat B'Charar would kick in. However, if it's still up for grabs, and especially if the meicher is still looking for other customers, so then there's no halacha that just because you bid first on a property, that nobody else is allowed to bid. Sometimes, like in public auctions, so everybody's being mahapach. Why am I mahapach more than you? I saw it in this newspaper, you saw it in that newspaper. I heard about it from my broker, you heard about it for your broker. We're equally mahapach, and therefore we can go ahead and both of us can go ahead and to put in a bid. Sometimes questions come into the houses that it was shown by 2 agents. The maker showed it first to Reuven with this agent, and he showed it to Shimon with that agent, and this one put it in the bid, that one put it in the bid. So in such a situation, the Shnei and Mahapchim, the 2 people trying to get the house, the maker is still trying to get the best deal he has. There's no problems of bidding such a property. But if basically the maker and the lekeach, they're selling to each other, they know that they're selling to each other. The question just is, could I go ahead? Could I go ahead and the last minute go ahead and go over to the maker, throw myself into the deal, sweet talk him, and grab the deal away from him? if we were at a situation where Ruvain selling to Shimon and Shimon selling to Ruvain, it doesn't matter if the maker is a goy or a yid. In those cases, that's where Aniyah Mahach Becharara would kick in. You have a house, not sure how it works in Florida. In New Jersey, what happens is the real estate agents basically they sign some sort of agreements. Then they sign then that agreement goes on to the lawyers, and then it goes into a period of attorney review. For 3 days officially, the attorneys fight back and forth, the Tnoim and the Pratim, and then they go ahead, and then it leaves attorney review, and there'll be a mortgage contingency, or there'll be an inspection contingency. Once the house is basically an attorney review, then kipshuta, for somebody else to get involved, there'll be a problem on imhak b'charara. Even though technically no contract the contract was not consummated, they can still go ahead and change things around. But in residential property, for sure, in attorney review, when it goes to attorney review, they end up on it. $5,000 more, $5,000 less. In commercial property, it's not true. In commercial property, very often property will enter attorney review and they can't pull their act together. In that case, there would not be a situation of Ani Hamahaf B'charara. But those are the basic parameters of Ani Mahaf B'charara. There are many cases of Ani Mahaf B'charara. Let's say a business wants to go ahead and steal a worker from another business. They want to offer him more money, and they want to sort of pull him away. He wasn't looking for a job. And they want to go ahead and pull him away. The school wants to pull a Rebbe, or the most geschmack shayla is the Erev Pesach cleaning lady. Is a mutter to go ahead and solicit a cleaning lady away from your neighbor? She worked at first 2 weeks in Purim Pesach, and now you want to go ahead and solicit her away. So again, the first question one has to ask is such a thing, is this a one and only opportunity, or is this available elsewhere? A Rebbe, sometimes you could say this is a star Rebbe. He has certain miles of waking up the kids. Shulchan Aruch brings down, not from everybody is one zeicha to learn. Every Rebbe has his individual miles, and therefore one can argue a Rebbe is a Metzia, and therefore one would be allowed to grab him away as long as he's not in contracts. Cleaning ladies, I don't want to start up with enough tzidkanias, but I'm not sure the difference is so pronounced to go ahead to say that it's a Metzia. You say you can't find a cleaning lady? I don't know. Usually if you look a little bit harder, pay another $1 or $2, you usually could find another cleaning lady. So, the cleaning lady is hard to be matir. However, in the case of a Rebbe, so then that would definitely, that should be mutter. Now, we're talking about, I guess, Jewish businesses. What happens if the person's an accountant, the person's a lawyer, and there are goyim who are being mahapach. And therefore, when there are goyim being mahapach, there are other goyim who are trying to pull this employee away. So then there's very little smichas das, because the guy is not so locked in. And it's very reasonable to assume that he's going to be chapped sooner or later. So then that l'chayra, there would not be a problem of oniyam haf b'charara. Just wanted to mention that the Nasivis, which says that, let's say a person's house goes into foreclosure and the bank takes it away, now it's being sold on a public auction or something similar to that. When the Bailam Rishonim lost the object against their will and now it's for sale, so the Nasivis says that Yoshar V'Toiv is Mechayev, that you sell it back to the bank, let the Bailam Rishonim buy it. Yoshar V'Toiv is Mechayev, that you allow the Bailam Rishonim, the original owner, to buy it back, and you do not bid on that property. However, once again, today's place can point out, if you're in the middle of Lakewood on Forest Avenue, no guy is willing to pay that price for that house. All the mahaptim there are going to be Yidden, and therefore, if the Yidden don't bid, it will go back to the original owner, and that's the case of the Nesivus. However, if it's a property which is not necessarily in a Jewish neighborhood, and therefore the Goyim are bidding on the property, so in that case, again, by you desisting does not mean that it's going to go back to the Meicher. So therefore, the regular halacha, therefore the halachas of Anei Mapach Harara would not apply. There's just a sample of this sugya of Yashar V'Tayv, but in response to the basic topic, but Adel Chaveri in business, if one recognizes that Parnasa comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's the Chaznish, and we are being mishtadel, then one doesn't have a hard time being mishtadel in a way which doesn't undercut, hurt, or abuse somebody else. If one lives in this man eats man, fend for yourself world, so then it becomes very difficult. Just want to conclude with the Geshmak HaMaisa. Matzio Salman said over when he was a bacher learning in Kfar Hasidim. So the Mincha Gedei Minyan, the Mincha in the middle of the day, in that neighborhood was yeshiva, as usually is. And there was a fellow who used to come down to Mincha in yeshiva. And when this guy would say Baruch Aleinu, the amount of emotion which went into this guy's Baruch Aleinu was, it was a sight to see. A sight to see, and the Bacher were all very impressed. Until they found out that this guy was a ruthless businessman, something similar to a gangster. And then the Bacher were very disturbed that it's contradictory. He's davening by Baruch Aleinu, pouring out his heart to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and then tomorrow he goes ahead and he's totally dishonest, totally ruthless. So they asked him, Elia, what's pshat? So Rabbi Elia said there's two ways for someone to daven Baruch Aleinu. One way the guy can say, Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm helpless without you. Please help me out, send me parnasa. The other way, Dr. Elia, is a person can tell the Rebbeinu Shalom, listen, Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm a smart guy, I'm ganz fine savvy, I can really take care of myself. The only one in this world who's smarter than me is you. Do me a favor, Rebbeinu Shalom. Please don't mess me up. Please let me be. Let me do it my way. That's what Rabbi said. The Sisa V'Yashar HaTayv defines the person, defines his emunah and talking like the Chaznish says, and therefore, what's halachically ours, we're allowed to take Lati Mishtadel. But if it's at the cost of another individual, the Sisa V'Yashar HaTayv, that defines us, and that defines our business practices. Okay? Hello, Rabbi.
Oh yeah. Well, how you doing?
Well, Hashem, good to see you.
Yeah.
Just want to say it reminds you of being in the Stafford on Motzei Shabbos.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh, great. Michas Chinuch Shiur was there.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Okay. Try.
Thank you very much for the share. Is there a din regarding shuls regarding this? A shul opens up next to another shul and takes, mispalim away from that shul. Is there such a din regarding this?
Rabbi has a truth about this. Rabbi said that if the first, you see again, the shuls that you're referring to are public institutions or private institutions?
Public. Well, I mean, imaginary case, but in my imaginary case,
it's easier if it's a private institution. See, if the private institution, you have like imagine a true there was a rebbe who opened up, and he was making parnas off the shul, and then some people didn't like certain things, which Ramesha feels in the tshuva were minor tinus. They opened up next door. There was not enough people to go around, and therefore the first rabbi had to sell his house at a great loss and close up shop. So Ramesha said that a shul is a business like any other business, and therefore if there's not enough to go around, unless your tinus are valid, so then you're not allowed to move out and start another shul. Now, a public institution might be a little bit more different because really it's owned by the members. and therefore, whoever's in charge, maybe it's their highest to keep the membership happy. But of course, it's a big statement. They want us to be right there to say it. But in a case where shul was used as a money-making business, Ramesha clearly writes that it's just like any other business, and the rules on him have to apply.
Rabbi Avishai, the two-part Shiloh. Number one is this din of Anya Mahapim Karar, it's enforceable in Besdin?
So the halacha is called a Russia. So that means that Bezdin will announce that he's a Russia, or Bezdin will or Shul will announce that he's a Russia, but they don't actually take the money away from one guy and give it to the other guy, because again, Bezdin can only enforce when something was actually purchased, and meanwhile nothing was purchased.
So then what happened in the case, I heard recently, somebody was speaking to a broker, and the broker tells him that he was asking about a property. Broker tells him that I know that the seller accepted an offer from someone else, but I'm telling you that if you offer him X amount plus, another, go up 10,000 on this other offer, then you'll be able to get it. So is that meaning that the seller heard the offer? He doesn't actually.
So like this, you see, you're asking a very good question, and it can be very technical depending on the details of the question. Sometimes, and I say again, I don't know how it works in Florida. I know it works in New Jersey. In New Jersey, it works that as soon as you accept a deal, you have to officially take your house off the market. And once you take your house off the market, you're not soliciting other offers, right? And it's unethical, et cetera. Could be it's even illegal in certain Ifanim. Now, what happens is that a lot of these, whenever you take the house off the market, it's going to take you 3 hours, right? You have to get to your phone, text message your broker has to unlist it, whatever else it is, right? There definitely are meichrim out there which are geschmack about lonim in taking the house off the market. Especially if you made the deal on Thursday, right? A lot of times the meicher doesn't get around to make that phone call until Monday morning, right? It's very odd looking, Einik Shabbos, et cetera. So in such a situation, since the meicher did not take it off the market, that means the meicher is still soliciting other offers. As long as the meicher is still soliciting other offers, so the meicher is not bound. That's number one. Number two is if the seller is a yid. If the seller is a yid, the Pesach Choshen brings a very interesting chazanish, which the chazanish wants to say a ma'id chazos type of svara. Chazanish wants to say a svara that the whole reason is l'sita yasher v'atayv. So why should be yasher v'atayv to l'keach? Let's be yasher v'atayv to the meicher. So if the meicher, if the l'keach sheni, the second guy, is offering a significant raise over the l'keach rishon, so the chazanish says that the same way it would be yasher v'atayv for the sheni, not instead of being yasher v'atayv for l'keach, maybe you should be yasher v'atayv for the meicher. That's the chiddush of the chazanish. There are those who don't like this chiddush because they feel there's a ritzvah at the beginning of a Sechras Onim that they feel that since the meicher was willing to let go of the property at that price, so he's already tzafim. Mash'enkin the lekeach, so therefore, why even more Yasher v'atayv than he was to himself? That's a shayla. If it's a meicher as a yid and you're already selling significantly more money, maybe you can make it my chazos. But in all these broker cases, if it's taka off the market and that the guy taka consummated the deal and the broker's mamish mishing around, then it can be called a Russia. But very often when these cases come into Bezdin and we research them, we find out that the house wasn't really so off the market. That the reason why the broker was telling that fellow that was because it wasn't as off the market as it could have been.
Getting back to Bar Metzra, what neighborhoods are considered, if it's not available, if to walk across to the next other side of the tracks, or or to a neighborhood that's a little bit not as desirable, or if it's 2 blocks further from the shul? At what point do we say that it's not a house that's doimah to the first one?
Not by Metzger, I mean Mitzia. You're saying Mitzia.
No, in Bar Metzra. No, I'm talking about in Bar Metzra.
No, Bar Metzger is only neighboring property. Bar Metzger is only neighboring property.
Correct. No, but there's no other houses available in the area.
No, so that's not Bar Metzger. That's only Mount Bacharor. Only Mount Bacharor we're saying is when there's no other houses available, then it's a Mitzia. If there's no other house available, then it's Hefker, right? So your question really is, what's called available? It has to be the same size, the same proximity to the shul. Pashtas, there has to be like an opportunity. It has to be a Mitzia. Mamish an opportunity. Something which is not such an opportunity is hard to make. Can't hear you.
Very good.
Okay, Shkoyach Rabbi